Good afternoon. I'm Marilyn Hollifield, a partner with the Holland & Knight Law Firm, an international firm, and my office is in Miami, Florida. I have been involved with Miami MoCAAD, the Miami Museum of Contemporary Art of the African Diaspora, since the beginning. And we are so excited today to present this creative conversation. Miami MoCAAD is proud to join Venture Cafe Miami and its local and global communities of innovators for this art talk today. We welcome you to this lunchtime art talk with Charlie Farrell, who will engage artist Morel Doucet in conversation. With its dedication to contemporary art of the African diaspora, Miami MoCAAD fully embraces artistic creativity of the peoples of Africa and its diaspora, whose resiliency and survival since times of slave bondage until today are inseparable from the development of contemporary Europe, the United States, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Charlie Farrell is one of Miami MoCAAD's inaugural interns. In a few weeks, she will begin studies in the Master of Fine Arts program at Florida State University. But she has always been passionate about community involvement. Her top career goal is to become a museum curator. Please welcome Charlie Farrell, who will introduce Morel Doucet and navigate this creative conversation. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Before we begin, I'd like to run through a couple of housekeeping items. All the participants, all the viewers will be muted for the ease of conversation. Please remember to be kind and treat others as you would like to be treated in the chat. Viewers will be able to send us questions through the Q&A function throughout the conversation. Towards the end of the conversation, we will have a little Q&A window and we will attempt to answer as many questions as we can. Just a heads up, this session is being recorded. If this makes you uncomfortable, you're more than welcome to hop out of this and then join us and watch us through our Facebook Live. Again, thank you all for joining us. And without much ado, I'd like to introduce our artist, Morel Doucet. He is a Haitian, Miami-based, Emmy-nominated artist working with ceramics, illustrations, and prints to explore themes of climate-based racism that are being experienced in Miami and globally by Black communities. Forced migration and displacement due to worsening conditions are problems that do not have easy solutions and need to be brought to the forefront. His work is doing just that. Doucet's work has been exhibited in the States and abroad, with locations including Miami, Florida, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Pomona, California, Northfield, Minnesota, Sao Tome and Principe, and Havana, Cuba. With 3 solo exhibitions and numerous other museum exhibitions under his belt, he is an accomplished artist that we are very happy to have with us today. Please be sure to check out his website, moreldoucet.com, to see some of his other works and stay up to date on what he's working on. Thank you for joining us. So I just mentioned that you work in a lot of different mediums. Do you have a favorite?
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you guys join me. It's gonna be very casual, so feel free throughout the conversation to ask me a question. I'm a full-time artist as well as a full-time educator. And so I'm always juggling different roles and different hats. So Charlie, to kind of answer your question, my foundation is painting and drawing.
Okay.
I was first kind of introduced to art at a very young age, where I had teachers that just saw raw talent in me. And then they convinced my mom to have me audition into a specialized program. And so through these programs, I went from using painting and drawing, and I was introduced to a variety of different mediums. So I don't really have a favorite. I would consider myself multidisciplinary. So whichever I'm trying to achieve in that moment is the medium I work with. For the past 6 years, I've worked primarily in ceramic, but I change it based on what I'm trying to do in that moment in time. So for the audience, I'm gonna pan the camera around and I'm gonna introduce you guys to a couple works that I'm working on right now. So last year in December, I had a solo exhibition and the title was called White Noise When Water, I messed up. It's white noise when raindrop whispers in moonlight screams in silence. And so I use a lot of allegory in my work in order to tell different stories that are happening around me, as well as that are affecting different communities of color. So this new body of work that I'm going to show you guys is called Water Grieves in the Six Shades of Death, which is another allegory where I'm examining water in the different facets it affects us as a collective, as a humanity, and how communities are being displaced as a result of that. So I'm going to pan the camera around. And then Charlie, feel free to jump in.
Okay.
All right.
So your previous exhibition, that was mostly ceramics, but your new exhibition that you're working on, your new works, those are mostly paintings, correct?
I still don't know yet. Right now,
Oh.
I'm telling myself that they're going to be paintings and mixed media drawings,
Okay.
but maybe later on it might change. So what you guys are looking at right now on the floor is a beginning of a body of work that'll be about 20 to 30 pieces total. And each one is going to reflect a different portrait of a person of color. And these portraits vary from archival footage, archival photograph, as well as pictures that I take on my phone when I go into different spaces in the community. And so to kind of give you guys some context about how these drawings and mixing media pieces are done. So what I've been doing for the past couple years is I would go into a certain location and I would gather different plant life from that location. And then I would bring them into the studio and create stencils from these plant life. And so in a sense, I'm mapping out South Florida through the ecology that is growing around these different kinds of neighborhood. The neighborhoods that I'm focusing primarily on are Black and Brown communities that are being displaced as a result of development that is happening here in South Florida. So I'll kind of pan the camera a little bit closer to kind of see the details.
I love the color palette that you chose. They're so bright.
Thank you. So the color palette definitely comes from the Caribbean. I feel like when you look at the architecture in the Caribbean, oftentimes they're very bold and they command space. And so with these figures, I'm going for a look that's both regal and then giving them agency within each of their individual portraits. I use, again, mixed media. So even on this one, I'm using a mason stain, which is a raw organic compound that I would use in my ceramic work. But in this context, I'm using it on top of the paper. And then on top of it is a husk of the coconut, which is treated like a paper, to create different kinds of textures and dimension within the work.
Okay. Can you show us some of, after this, would you be able to show us some of your ceramic work? Because I've seen them and I just think everyone else should see how awesome they are and just how you're able, you have mastery over your paintings, but you also have mastery over your ceramic work. And they tend to be small and delicate. And I just think that's really amazing.
Let me just grab this one very quickly from my table. So this is one of the works from my solo exhibition from last year. And you can kind of see the details. A lot of the flora and fauna is being repeated in a lot of the work. So that's one kind of thread that weaves and intersect my work. When I think of ceramic as a medium, is the only material that intersects human history in terms of culture, time, history, demographic. It transcends all of those different realms. Without ceramic, archaeologists would be missing a large part of our human history. So through the shards that are left behind in our human history, we're able to understand the dietary needs of a certain culture, the medicine they take, certain rituals that were done. And so ceramic, it's an incredible material. I even think of it as this magical realism. For those of you guys that kind of follow like the Bible and things like that, when you think of like in the beginning, how man was kind of formed from the earth. So you're essentially using the same infinite material that came from the ground, and then you're transforming it through fire to become this very viscid object. So for me, is I use it because there's so many different properties and elements in how it intersects culture, religion, and these different things for me. I'm gonna move on from the floor and then kind of pan around in the studio. So I'm working on different sizes. So this is another piece I'm working on. I don't know what's gonna happen yet, but this is the very beginning of it. I work very organically and kind of just let the paper decide what they want to do. And then from the smaller guys, I'm also gonna be doing some larger work. So these are still in progress. As you can see, the same textures again from the flora and the fauna I've been gathering. And then another kind of element I've been working with is the idea of kind of fencing. When you think of a fence, it either brings you in or it keeps you out. And so within the context of climate gentrification, the communities that I'm focusing on are being displaced. And through this displacement, they don't really have oftentimes the equity or the capital to move and go. So for me, I feel like through these work, I might be capturing like the last image and energy in these communities, because in the next, let's say 50 to 60 years, these communities might be completely gone, including the people that live in them.
How do you see climate gentrification playing out in Miami specifically? Because I know Miami's pretty much on the water and they get hit by hurricanes that are worse every year.
Yeah, I think, out of the states, Miami, we're in a unique position where we're surrounded by water all around. And so I think we're like ground zero for testing out what climate change would look like in the US. Even if you go further south from Miami down to Key West, last year from the hurricane that hit them, there was a lot of the properties that are damaged. And so these properties are deemed unsafe to live in, and the residents are trying to get the US government to buy these homes because you can't live in them and you can't sell them because they're not deemed livable. So the only thing they can do is try to get the US government to give them some kind of payment or monetary value for the loss of that property. And so because these people can't live in their home, there was a massive exit of people leaving the Florida Keys and trying to move further north or out of the state of Florida in general. So I think as a small kind of sample to see what the impact of climate can be, if we look at Key West and what has happened to certain residents in that region, just imagine that bigger in Miami, where the population is, over like 6 million people here. So, it's very frightening and very scary in terms of that. So you can see, like, it's some of the work. This is another one I'm working on. This is
Did
done.
You get closer
with
so we could see?
Yeah, sure. So this is done with tissue paper, cobalt black, which is another raw organic material that I use in my ceramic work. When I think of this, I think of the idea of kind of map also. So if you're in a plane or in a helicopter, you're looking down at the landscape is what I think about when I'm viewing something like this, in terms of the way the mark making, the different foliage. It makes me think of oil, when oil spills into the ocean and the amount of damage that it causes. So there's different factors affecting us on all front. Just yesterday, the Biscayne waters, there's been a massive amount of dead fish washing up in the water because there's a lot of pollution that is being dumped into the bay. And so again, you know, in 2020, we just had 3 years ago a massive die-off of marine life. It continues on, and there's no policy being put in place to make that happen.
Do you see your work as bringing more awareness to the issue, just outside? Because I think in Black poor communities who are being affected more often and sooner than other communities, I think like we are already fully aware of the effects of climate change, but do you see your work as bringing it to maybe communities who don't think about these issues as often?
I would say it's a combination of both.
Okay.
You know, when I go into different meetings about climate change, seawater rise, oftentimes I'm the only person of color in these rooms. And I tell people, look, it's not that other Black people don't care about these meetings, it's that they don't have the luxury of coming to the meeting because they have to take care of their family, they have to put food on the table. And so it's a matter of not really, it's a matter of, because they lack a resource to do certain things and they have to provide, they're not always at the table for these kind of meetings. And so with these work, it's not only bringing awareness to what is going on, but it's also highlighting for those that don't have the luxury of being in these spaces as well. Like, you know, even like in some of these other ones that are still being worked on, you know, all kinds of people, you know, people with locks, people, it's a variety of things, you know, that I'm working on. And so I just want to bring all voices to the table that I feel like are being left out of the conversation. And so I don't know what this body of work will look like, but I'm hoping maybe sometime next year, when I have a few more pieces finished, the vision can kind of come to me a little bit.
I appreciate that because I think a lot of climate change activism is very much whitewashed. And I think now people are starting to take it seriously because it's affecting communities that didn't affect, you know, maybe 10, 20 years ago. But these are been issues that we've always had to struggle with and grapple with.
Yeah, absolutely, you know, and which is why a lot of my work, like one topic that I like to explore is the idea of colorism. You know, so me being from the Caribbean, colorism plays a very important role in the social hierarchy of what happens in different issues in terms of education, jobs, and opportunities that are given to certain people. So this was another piece from my solo exhibition. And these are called the Moonlight Maidens. And so it's kind of looking at the idea of colorism and what it looks like. And so you can kind of, sort of thinking about like the different shades of brown to cream to white, you know, and people that bleach their skin oftentimes walk away with the side effects. They have like lesions in their skin. So this kind of effect for this glaze is kind to highlight that, you know, people are risking their lives, their skin, getting cancer just to be lighter and be perceived in a certain way because society, if you're darker complexion, there's less access and opportunities for you. So, you know, again, you know, with my work, many of the topics are very heavy. And so I don't try to overbear the viewer with the context of the work. I give them a lot of room to interpret it in their own kind of manner. And then within the context of the teapot as well, you know, me being Haitian American, the teapot as a vessel plays a very important role in the culture in terms of etiquette. If you go to someone's house, they're going to offer you coffee, they're going to offer you tea. And so it's a sign of welcome, it's a sign that, you know, you're okay to be here, you know? Because prior in our Haitian history, when we were slaves, we were not allowed to drink tea or have soup, you know? And so the slave masters would let the slave eat a cow, eat a pig, kill a deer. But as a slave, you're forbidden from drinking soup. Because the act of you drinking soup, it meant that you were civilized, you had class, you were refined. And so as a slave, you weren't considered any of those things, you were savage. And so you're forbidden from drinking soup. And so when the Haitians got their independence from France, the women, which are oftentimes the bearer of the traditions in the culture, one of the first things they did as act of defiance and kind of claiming their own agency was making a custom soup from a pumpkin gourd, as well as drinking tea. That was the first thing they did right after they won the war against the French. So the teapot as a motif occurs in my dream. It occurs in my work in different contexts and different fashions as well. As I kind of pan away, so you can see other ways the teapot is used in the work. This is another piece
Oh,
looking
that's
at the
beautiful.
effects of the bleaching of the coral reef. This is another teapot again, and I'm very much interested in the texture of the work. And so oftentimes, depending on the piece, people will ask me, is it real, is it fake? And I go, everything you see there is all ceramic, but I pay very close attention to the detail, which is very important for me.
Okay.
Here's another
That's
piece,
amazing.
kind of last topic on colorism. This is another one I have in
Those
the
are
studio.
beautiful.
So this is 3 heads I have in the studio. And again, 3 different shades of tone. And I use, within the symbols, for the brown figure, is embellished with dandelions. And so when I think of a dandelion as a plant, it doesn't have free will. Whichever direction the wind blows into is where it flies off. So I feel like, when it comes to communities of color, Black people, when they're being displaced, they don't have a voice or agency of where they want to go. They oftentimes end up somewhere where it's cheap and affordable. It may not be the best situation, but at least they can survive or try to thrive in that situation. So again, it's very subtle in the work. I try not to be overbearing and let the viewer interpret the work on their own.
I think it's wonderful that your work just visually is gorgeous, but also once you start getting into it and you start unpeeling these layers, it gets really deep. And I think it's wonderful that you allow the viewer to engage with your work at whatever level they feel comfortable, because they could read your work as simply, these are pretty ceramics.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they want to get into it, they can read it as, oh, he's talking about climate change and all these deeper issues that are affecting our communities right now. But I like that you allow us to gauge where we feel comfortable with engaging your work. Is all the work in your studio right now, is that all yours?
So it's a variety, it's a mix actually. So
Okay.
one thing I've been doing beginning last summer actually, and then throughout quarantine, is I've been using a few funding I've been getting to support other artists that are emerging. And so within my studio, I have like a wall dedicated to works that I collect, and I want to support other artists that are Black and Latinx. And so here is a mix of artists from South Florida as well as abroad. This is an artist from Barbados. This is another artist I got last year who had graduated from the New York Academy of Fine Arts. So this is a mix, and these work for me connect to different parts of my identity or certain experiences I had. And so something about it would draw to me, and I would want to acquire or support that work. Some of it I buy directly from the artist, or others I do a trade with that artist. So I think when people think of collectors, people think of some rich white person who's buying work, and I think we need to change that narrative, where artists should support other artists, and the galleries does not exist without the artists. So as artists, we have a lot of power and agency, and so the more of us that start doing that, the more we can change the narrative and the perception of who is allowed to own art and who does the art belong to. And so so all of these works are all under $1,000. So I'm not like this person with a lot of money. They're very like cheap works that I buy. I spend maybe 3 weeks. I stop eating out and I'll save that money, and then I'll buy the work directly from the artist. So it shows that this small sacrifice can bring a different kind of energy into the work. And so I'm gonna keep buying some more as I go on, but it's a knife. And so for those in the Zoom, if you guys want to learn more about each of these artists, if you go directly to my Instagram account, I have an entire account dedicated that it highlights each one on the wall. So just go to IG and you can find out more about these individual artists. And then I think something else that's pretty interesting in my studio is I live with work in different genres, you know? So this is a piece I did back in high school. I'm probably my sophomore year of high school. And so I have it in the studio. I'm trying to pull it up for you guys. It's kind of interesting. It's wrapped in a box, you know, but it's interesting to kind of live with work in different genres in the studio to kind of see this evolution of the work. This is another one from high school. This guy over here. So I think it's interesting, you know, to see your work change and develop in different topics of exploration that happens, you know. Something else I would recommend for my artists in the Zoom is when you develop a body of work, you should always keep 1 or 2 pieces for yourself in that series. Do not sell off the entire series. And this is advice I got from, I won't say his name, but it's a really amazing artist who's well known in the industry, where, you know, he sold off this entire body of work, and these work were selling now at minimum $250,000 minimum. And he cannot even profit off of that series because he does not own a single one of them. So as artists, you know, if you make a series of 12 pieces, you know, keep 1 or keep 2 of them for yourself. Don't sell it off to the galleries and the collectors. Because, you know, in 10, 20 years from now, you know, depending on how your career changes, you want to be able to benefit off of your hard work. And so if you have a piece from a series that's very popular, then if you're in a hard time, you can cash in on that value of the work, you know, so don't sell everything off, you know.
Morel, why is it important that we support other artists, and how can us non-art collector folks do that? So just buying works of our favorite artists, visiting them in galleries, following them on Instagram. Any advice?
It's a lot of different ways, you know. You don't even have to buy the work. You can, like, you know, things like sharing the works, people you know who likes to collect work, you know, I'm sharing it on social media, tuning into conversation, asking for a studio visit for the artist. So there's a multitude of ways to support an artist. You know, oftentimes it's not always financial. You know, there's other ways to do that. You know, I've been in many opportunities because I work as an educator, where I've had someone come up to me to do a kind of programming. And I go, it's an amazing program, but unfortunately my plate is full. But here's 3 or 4 recommendations I will give you, and I'll support any one of them that you choose to work with, you know. So I've done that multiple times, where if an opportunity comes to me, I can't do it, and I pass it on to someone else I know who will come through on that project, you know. So support looks different in many kinds of ways. And you know, and that's one thing, you know, because sometimes, like, this many times I will do something, I'll forget about it, and like a year later, they'd be like, yeah, I got the project. Do you remember me? You gave me a recommendation for this project and I forgot, you know, because it just happened very organically for me, you know?
I want to ask, how did you get into ceramics? So you started with painting, but then you moved into ceramics, you said, for 6 years?
Yeah, so funny story. So my first ceramic piece was back in 3rd grade, and it was a small snail. My dad has it in his house back in Haiti. So it was a small snail that I rolled up and kind of put some 2 eyeballs on. And then I was exposed to ceramic throughout middle school. And then in high school, I had an art teacher named Susan Banks, where she was in love with the ocean, marine life. And so I really took a strong liking to her lifestyle and what she was doing, and then the quality of the work that she was producing. And so if you guys go on my website, a lot of my earlier work are very much inspired by the ocean and things like that, because she had a very big imprint on me. Yeah, but ceramic, you know, I've had a little bit of exposure in elementary, middle, and then high school is when I really was able to refine the process for working with it. I went into my undergrad at MICA, the Maryland Institute College of Art, being an illustration major, you know, because we're conditioned as artists to, you know, make sure you you make money, you're not a starving artist. So in my mind, I thought, okay, I don't like graphic design, but I'm good at it. Illustration is where the money is at. So for 3 years in MICA, I was a illustration major, and I hated every single moment of it. And I realized in my junior year at MICA that me and the art directors were butting head. And so I had to take a step back and reflect. These are essentially the gatekeepers in the industry of illustration. And I'm literally not agreeing with their ideas and how they're interpreting my work. And so in my junior year of college, I realized that my agency and my voice was much more important for me than trying to follow direction based on what this critic or this director wanted me to do. And so I changed my major my second semester of junior year in college. But me being the overachiever I was, it didn't affect my graduation year. So I still graduated in 4 years because I was doing 21 credit semesters since my freshman year of college. So really nobody really knew my major in school because I was in graphic design, I was in printmaking class, I was in drawing class. I knew I was there on a scholarship. And I told myself, listen, something got to work. I'm an immigrant and I don't have a safety net. Like dad is not going to cover. If this doesn't work out, then there's no exit for me, So I exposed myself to every medium, every opportunity that I could get. Because for me, it was do or die. It was sink or swim, So I think because of that, being an immigrant, not having a backup, I was very pragmatic in what I wanted to do and what I wanted to expose myself to, And so as a result of that, when I changed my major, just like things were very normal for me. I graduated. Had I stayed another semester, I would have had 2 majors, a minor, and 5 areas of concentration because I took so many classes in school. Yeah. So I think, that's one thing also, for me, being Haitian plays a big role in the work that I do and the voices as well.
Okay.
Cool.
Was it hard to break into ceramics? I'm not sure there are a lot of Black ceramic artists in the U.S.
There's not, so across the U.S., I would say there's about 11 of us that are working on a active basis. Mm-hmm. And then for the majority of that, there's not many of us. The only more prominent artist who used clay was Theaster Gates. And then he took a break from it because the practice was so time consuming and he was not selling the work at the rate that he wanted to. So as an industry, it was very much underlooked by the museums and the galleries. It was I'll say it back in the mid 2000s, there was a resurgence of people wanting to buy work in ceramic. But for a very long time, ceramic was kind of categorized under craft. And it was not respected in the same category as painting, drawing, and photography. So, more recently, there's been a shift of ceramic being accepted into the same genres as well.
Oh, okay. I think do we have time for one more question before our Q&A starts? Yeah, okay. I'm running the show. So do you have any advice to artists who are just starting out in their career? Any tips or tricks that you would suggest to them how to make it?
Yeah, definitely. So for those of you that are thinking about becoming artists, number one thing I always tell my seniors when I go into the colleges is, not even seniors, the freshmen really, is to expose yourself to different kinds of art form. So if you're a graphic designer, do not take only graphic design class. You're doing yourself a disservice, because if I'm gonna hire you, either you're gonna be really, really like stupid amazing, where nobody cannot like do what you do, or you're gonna have different skill sets where you can troubleshoot a project as it comes to you. So I think as an artist, the more skill sets you have, the more you're able to adapt to different kinds of situation. But I do have some certain friends that are really amazing in their industry, and they took this one kind of class, but they're like the go-to person for that style or for that thing.
Okay. So do you think being versed in different mediums has helped? So even if you're painting, do you think, being versed in illustration and ceramics helps your paintings?
Absolutely. When I think of the color palette, when I think of textures, all of those different skill sets come back into the work. Like even like the stuff up here, like on the shelving, different colors, everything connects. And sometimes when you're in the moment, you may not understand why you're doing it, but it eventually comes back full circle somehow or some way.
Okay.
Yeah, these are like some prototypes from some older work that I had. Yeah, so everything connects somehow or some way.
Was it hard to craft those ceramics? Because those are small, right? Was it hard getting them just right?
So I work in a combination of, so I do freeform work as well, but I also design things on the computer, and they're 3D printed for me. And so some of these 3D printed becomes mold. And so I use
Okay.
some modes in order to speed up the production of my work. And for me, because I'm a full-time educator, I don't have the luxury of time compared to someone who's only in the studio. And so for me, through the modes and production, I'm able to kind of speed up certain things that I do. So things like this, for example, is a combination of freeform and using a mode as well.
Do you have a favorite piece of ceramic work, which is, I know it's a weird question, but or something that you're most proud of, or something that's, would be most technically difficult that you're very proud that you were able to complete?
Um, I'll say not really, but I do. I don't think I'm gonna. What's the word? Like this piece, for example, it comes in a set of 7, and so I was telling myself, what? I think this is gonna be the series I'll keep for myself. This piece.
Okay.
There's something about it that I really love. It hangs on the wall in a form of a circle. Let me try to give you a better view of it. So it hangs on a wall, and there's 7 of them that connects together. And so I probably wouldn't sell the series unless it goes to a really, really awesome home.
Okay. I think we're about to move to our Q&A session. We have a couple questions, so we're going to jump to that.
Yes,
if you have
some questions coming in. So the first one is, I have Anique Duvier. How do you market yourself and your work? So this is a question for you, Morel.
Oh, awesome. So I joined Instagram back in 2012. And I was part of like the early people that registered on Instagram. And so I use social media. So my account is a business account on Instagram. And so I pay like $3 to $5 depending on what I'm trying to put out. And it has a bigger reach in terms of what I'm doing. And then in the early on when I was doing work right after school, I would send a portfolio of like 10 pieces to certain magazines to see if they would pick up the work. And so one of the earliest magazines that picked up my work was Beautiful Bazaar. And so through that magazine, I was able to get a wider reach. And then right around that time, I got picked up by my gallery in Baltimore. And one thing I wanted for my gallery was making sure that I had agency in the work that I was doing. I know early on, I did not want to be confined to doing one kind of work. And so I told my guy, like, look, I'm still a very much a emerging artist. I did not want to be confined to one kind of work. And so that's one thing that I did as well. We kind of changed the camera around. Kind of see my face. All right, there you go.
Yeah. And I think that's so powerful. Just like the way that artists have been able to use social media to get themselves out there and gain access in ways that they probably weren't able to in previous years. So it's definitely been a really good resource. I can see that.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I always tell some of my friends is, look, do not rush to get a gallery representation. The terms have to be right, because when you sign up with a gallery, oftentimes, you're splitting your profit 50-50 with that gallery, versus if you're independent, you're marketing your own work for yourself, you're keeping 100% of that profit. So one thing that I've done for myself is I have the work for the gallery and I have work for myself that I make for a different kind of different kinds of people. So on my IG page, I have a second brand called Doucet Collectibles, which is a brand separate from my gallery work, that people are able to buy work at a affordable price point, separate from that. So there's one thing kind of go around the gallery without, cutting cords and stuff.
Definitely. Agency and access are the words I'm hearing.
Mhm.
We have a few more questions. So Denise Johnson is asking, how does your art reflect the social justice issues of today, including your work in progress, so the new work that you mentioned? And how does the current pandemic affect your process?
It's an amazing question. Let me see. So I say, with most artists, many of us are working in the studio independently to begin with. So quarantine, we've been doing that for a very long time. I think because of the pandemic and the movement, there's been a very deep fascination of Black artists. And so I think, as a creator, there's more people having eyes on us. So I feel like, there's an opportunity, but also being mindful that you're not a token or a victim of that, where you produce the work when it's like you put the work out when it's right, and don't do it because it's a trend,
Mhm.
That's very moving. And it's definitely an interesting time, I would say, in the art world. Definitely when it comes to Black artists and making sure that they're not just represented but well represented, and like those motivations behind different organizations and things. So definitely important. Another question we have is, how does being an art educator play into your artistic practice?
Ooh. So for me, they go like this. So I've been working in the museum world for almost 10 years now. Next year will be 9. It will be like 9.5 next year for me. And so I would not be where I am today if it was not for the educators or teachers that saw something in me. And so through being in the museum, when I go into certain spaces, especially for my male students, I let them know, look, football is not the only way out the hood. Basketball is not the only way out the hood. Like, you're really dope at this drawing, you might become an architect, you might become an engineer. So by being visible and present in certain communities, is giving the youth access and a different way of thinking, to not shy away from their raw talent and try to find that talent and cultivate it into something for them.
Definitely. And I'd love to ask, how does your experience in your work and as an arts educator kind of connect to like yourself growing up and dealing with like the education system, and being local to Miami? Like, how do all those things overlap?
So I come from a family of educators and historians. And so my mom is one of 11 siblings. And from that 11, 7 of them are educators and then 2 are historians. And so I've always been around academia. Being Haitian, education is very important for me. And so I've always, like, it's important, but it's not, there's other ways around it. Actually, repeat the question again for me.
How does like your experience as an arts educator overlap with like your upbringing? So like different experiences that you had growing up, and having
Mhm.
like support systems or lack of support systems. And how does that kind of like push your passion to work with these students in Miami?
Okay, cool. Yeah, so for me, it's a mix, For the large majority of my experience, I had a lot of positive teachers that really guided me. Because I'm in a museum, I'm always doing research, lesson plan, teacher workshops. And so a lot of the skill sets I'm learning about certain artists, I'm able to bring it back into the studio with me.
Very nice, very awesome. And we have another question from an anonymous attendee. Are any of your projects for sale?
Oh man. So the question is yes, but not at the moment. So all of the new work that you guys see in the studio will be released sometime in 2021. But, just on this Zoom, I'm going to be doing a special release of prints that will be dropping sometime this month. I don't know the date. And so that's a exclusive. So it's a limited edition prints that are going to be coming out. And so I have an entire campaign going to be rolling out in the coming week or so. So stay tuned.
I'm excited.
And so
That's awesome.
the prints will be under my other brand, Doucet Collectibles. So they'll be affordable for those that can't afford the larger work and the more and those things like that. So
we have a participant that says that they're probably going to have to get one of those prints, so they'll be on the lookout for that.
No, absolutely. So the prints, there's 3 versions of them. There's a PT, which is a 11 by 17. There's a grand, which is 20 by 30, and then there's a deluxe version, which is 24 by 36. So there's 3 price points for you to be able to afford the prints.
That's awesome. We're definitely going to be looking forward to those. I think everyone here is going to be looking forward to those dropping.
Yeah, so stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
And just to reiterate, so that you can be able to keep up with everything that Morel is doing, his Instagram account is Morel Doucet, and he also has Doucet Collectibles and the Doucet Collection. So I put some links in the chat, but be sure to follow and keep up with all the amazing work that he's doing.
Perfect. And anybody want to reach out to me, slide in my DMs. I do lesson plans. I've had educators reach out to me to do lesson plans or virtual classroom visits. So I'm pretty open and pretty flexible to working with other kinds of people.
Hey, do we have any last questions before we wrap up? I think I had a question. What inspires you to keep making art?
I think like art for me is very political, and it also it helps me transcend a lot of the chaos around me. I think 2020 has been definitely trifling, and so by being able to be in the state where it's meditative, you're able to reflect and go into deep kind of thinking. It keeps me sane, it keeps me sane. I enjoy the work that I do. And so if I'm having a crazy day, I know if I go into the studio, it's gonna keep me calm and keep me zen.
So how often do you spend in the studio? Do you come every day to?
It depends. So when when I was working in the museum, I'll spend about 4 to 5 hours every day in the studio. So I'll do like 8 hours in the museum and then 3 to 4 hours in the studio.
It's a crazy schedule, but I mean, if you love what you do, then it's worth it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I think that's it. No last questions, and I think we're good to wrap up. Is there anything else you wanted to add or let the viewers know?
Nope, we're good. If you want to keep up to date, follow me on Instagram. I try to be active on there every now and then.
That's awesome. Okay. I think we're gonna hop on to our. Yeah, thank you everyone for coming. I think we're going to do so.
Field might have some closing words.
First of all, thank you, Nadia Simone Laws, for handling such a wonderful Q&A for this creative conversation. Many thanks to Morel Doucet for sharing his time, his talent, and his inspiration with us. We met him when he was a participant in Miami MoCAAD's first pop-up exhibit, Summer of 2019. And the one and only fabulous curator, culture producer, Donna Marie Baptiste curated that show as an independent curator. The title was Reconstructing Identity, an Exploration in the Diaspora through Artistic Practice. And even then, Morel was a big hit, and we're so honored that he was able to be here today. I want to thank Charlie Farrell for taking the lead on this creative conversation. Charlie and Nadia are our two fabulous inaugural student interns, and we will be staying in touch with them to keep an eye on their progress, because we know that they are going to be doing good things and many things in their journey. We also would like to thank our steadfast and committed volunteers, Michelle Johnson and Dale Jennings, who with our student interns have been creating and preparing and researching for our newsletters, which you can find in our Instagram, as well as in our website, which is MiamiMoCAAD.com. We have a special thanks to Venture Cafe Miami and Aileen Alon for their work in coming together in this partnership to present our creative conversation, a conversation that through the lens of Morel Doucet, we were able to touch upon history, culture, climate change, colorism, social justice, and living as an artist. We hope you will become a part of our journey. We hope you will take a look at our newsletters. We hope that you will join us again in September for our next creative conversation. Thank you, Miami MoCAAD team. Thank you to all of you who took time to join us for lunch for this creative conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.